OK, Shanker, so the budget, it didn't look great. What is your view on it? Was it the right thing? Are they going the right way?
So I think they would argue this is a fiscal statement and it's intended to ensure the fiscal house is in order. My concern here is that there's a danger that you sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater, and because of the market's reaction to the mini budget, that what we're seeing now is very much back to the old orthodoxy of the only levers you can really pull are austerity, cuts in public sector spending, or tax rises, and that's really all you have. And unfortunately, the problem is that that's not the problem with the UK economy. The problem with the UK economy over the long term has been a lack of growth, and therefore what the levers you should be pulling are the levers that generate economic activity, and that is principally regulatory reform. To some extent, you want to do something about the tax burden, which is that it's incredibly high in the UK. And if you make it higher, if you make it worse for people, then, I have some sympathy for what you just played in Patrick Minford's statement, that you're just going to discourage investment in the UK, and you're going to discourage people from coming to the UK, and you're going to encourage people leaving the UK and going to places that where they're not facing such a high tax rate and so on. So I hope that they're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I hope we are going to now see some concrete regulatory reform proposals that lower the cost, that make things cheaper for people, that are focused on growing the economy and creating economic activity. But I have to say that we haven't seen very much sign of that at the moment.
They've also got the fuel duty rises. I mean, what does that ultimately mean? It seems like they're literally going to just jump up the price quite quickly for next March and April.
Yeah, well, they've said it's not government policy to do that, but there has been some reporting of that potential increase in April. And again, it's the same sort of thinking, which is the way we solve this problem is to increase the sort of static revenues that come into the Treasury without recognising that actually it's dynamic growth that generates far more revenue to the Treasury. I think I said to you, Nana, in a previous interview that one of my colleagues is Rob Portman, who was the former head of the Office of Management and Budget in the US, and he would say that once you see the effect of growth on the economy, it sort of seas of red ink are washed away, and you see the massive impact of even very small amounts of growth on the economy. So I think they're operating with a very restricted toolbox on all of this. It's a fiscal macroeconomic toolbox, and they're ignoring the very real microeconomic levers that they actually do have. But reform is difficult, and you need to plan for it. And I think Liz Truss discovered that if you don't plan for it well, then you'll be sort of besieged by those who don't want reform, and that will be extremely damaging for you. So there's not much time left to do a lot of this. The UK left the EU with the deal back in 2020. There's a lot we could have done between then and now, and we haven't really done any of it.
We seem to be following, as you said, the same old orthodoxy. Stay right there, because I'm also joined by former Minister for Europe, Denis MacShane. OK, Denis, is the autumn statement good news or bad news? What do you think?
It's certainly good news, I think, for Labour on the whole. But Jeremy Hunt, overnight, to take 2.6 million people who aren't paying tax now and make them taxpayers to pay for some of Sunak's weird management. It's very techie stuff, this, of Treasury finances. But overall, just a broad failure of the last 10 years of austerity. I think, we're coming up to that time for a change moment in politics, irrespective of the qualities of Sir Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak, when Labour probably is going to be the largest party in the next election. And certainly this helps. We'll just read all the papers this morning. I mean, the Tory.
But what would Labour have done differently? Because Labour, I mean, they signed off all the things, so they were all for Liz Truss's ideas, apart from obviously the high rate tax. Then they've been following and agreeing to a lot of this anyway. So what would they do different?
No. Am I on the Labour front?
No, but I'm just wondering what
shadow cabinet. Well, I would not have started, as Paul Thompson of the Institute of Fiscal Studies made clear. The first big mistake was George Osborne imposing austerity, which stopped British growth, not quite dead, but compared to the rest of Europe, very fast. There's a second point which Labour can't discuss.
Well, listen, we'll carry on with that second point, but I'm going to come back to Shanker very briefly. Shanker, OK, so instead of what was done, because you talked about the fact that obviously they're using the same old Treasury orthodoxy, how could we potentially get out of this? Because they didn't do anything for people with mortgages either, so there was nothing there. So there doesn't seem to be anything there for anyone.
No, and I think the first thing you need to do is diagnose why we're in this situation in the first place, because I think the sort of playbook that they seem to be pulling out is the playbook of the sort of post-global financial crisis where we were also coming out of a deep global slowdown and recession. But the reasons why we're in this place are very different from those. Obviously, you don't shut the global economy down in the way that we have done for 2 years. And print vast amounts of money, 500 billion on COVID recovery, and expect nothing to happen. I mean, it was pretty clear that we were going to be hitting a big global recession as a result of this. And many of us have been talking about this for quite some time. So if you know that that is the problem, that's the reason you're in this mess, you need to focus on generating private sector economic activity again, because you've actually, it's government intervention that has slowed that activity. It's not because, there was some kind of slowdown in the business cycle or something of that nature. So I think you need to figure out what are the tools in my toolbox that are going to stimulate that kind of economic activity and growth. And it really is about generating more competition in the UK market and regulatory reform.
OK, well, let me come back to Dennis, because you alluded to the papers all being pretty much, as I've read them, none of them are in support of it at all. There doesn't seem to be much going for it. I'm trying to find some positive in it. Do you see any positive in it, apart from the fact that it's so bad that it means Labour may well push ahead?
Let's leave that to one side. It's kind of hard. I mean, one thing that disappoints me is somebody stole my car, sort of boring old diesel Peugeot 4 or 5 years ago, and I decided that was a sign from up above that I should go green. So I haven't had a car for 4 or 5 years, but I'm thinking of getting one. Natural turn is to get an electric vehicle, and he's just put put road tax on it. So that just discourages everybody who might think of saying, right, I'll make my little contribution to global warming, I'll go electric. I just don't understand it completely. But they walk in terror of their own backbenchers. I don't want to open a debate, but you could unlock competitive trade tomorrow if you started competing with Europe. But 70% of all our small, medium enterprises have simply stopped trading with Europe because of the Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak red tape. That is a deregulatory measure that could really kickstart the economy.
Why don't they do that, though? I mean, let's bring Shanker back in. I mean, why don't they get rid of the red tape? Isn't that what Liz Truss wanted to do? But, of course, they got rid of her because she didn't quite sing from the right song sheet. I mean, why have they not done that, Shanker?
Well, Dennis makes an interesting point that I want to just focus on, which is the barriers that are faced by British business and by the UK to Europe. And actually, I mean, there are reasons for this. So if the UK people voted to leave the EU, then you need to deliver on that in the way that minimises the damage and the disruptions, which are the barriers that Dennis was referring to, and you need to maximise the opportunities. You've got to do both of those things at the same time. So That is why you have the trade policy agenda. There's a lot of trade deals that we've been able to do that we would not have been able to do inside the EU because of the baggage the EU brings to the table. The EU has taken 20 years to do deals with Mercosur, with India and so forth. They still don't have one with many of these countries. So the UK has some opportunities there, and it needs to minimise the disruptions. That's border management, which we need to really push on. And we also need to agree with the EU. And the problem we have here is we need to take the trade agreement that we have, and it has to be a trade agreement in order for you to have these other advantages and the regulatory reform that you're able to put in. And you need to then talk to the EU about, deepening that trade agreement, which we do with all of our trading partners, every trading partner.
Well, let me bring Dennis in for sort of a last word, because we haven't got much time left, so I want to bring Dennis in.
Well, I really don't want to turn this into Brexit. Honestly, we're not here for that. But as George Eustice, I used to debate with him. He was a UKIP guy, then he became a Tory MP. A minister said the Australia trade deal is a disaster for British farmers. So Liz Truss panicking, saying, I want to sign trade deals, signed away the shop. We need a tougher approach. We also need a friendly approach. And we've had 6 or 7 years of all our press and Boris Johnson sneering at Macron, sneering at Europe. Let's calm that down and see what we might be able to work out. And let's have more export and trade. Trade throughout British history is what increases wealth. We cut the trade.
Well, that's exactly. We know that trade increases wealth, but high taxes, I don't think they do.